and welcome to episode 9, Her Finance Talk. My name is Sue Diamond and I'm your host, and our goal is to help women create a better relationship with their money so you can live your best life. So thanks for joining us today and investing in your financial well-being. Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club, and our mission is to socialize the idea that it's okay for women to talk about money, because knowledge is power, and when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. Women empowering women is a mantra we love to live by, and one that has helped to inspire women for decades. Where would we be without each other? So let me welcome our guest today, Sasha Lee. Sasha's a certified credit consultant and financial literacy specialist. She's the CEO for the Privilege Alliance, which is her company, and it's a credit restoration service company. And she focuses on teaching and empowering clients to get their finances in order. So today's topic is, what does my credit score mean and why should I care? Well, if you're like most people, then your credit score may be something that's been on your mind lately, and or the idea of your credit score might seem a little confusing and intimidating. You know, with the economy today, what we've just gone through with COVID and other factors, it can be hard to know what to do with your finances. So in order to make sure everything is running smoothly in the future, it's important to understand how your credit works and how it affects our lives. So today's podcast, we're going to help shed some light on these questions so that you can feel confident about where you stand financially today. But before we dive into the topic with Sasha, would you just expand a little bit for our listeners, just in terms of who you are, on a personal and professional level, and also, why you're passionate about this topic?
Well, thanks for having me today, Sue. It's a pleasure to be on this platform, to see what you've created. We met just a short time ago, and it was very impactful to see how you brought this group together to empower women and to make us more aware of our financial situations. So I did meet you at a time where my finances itself they were just a mess, like like a lot of Americans. And then unfortunately, the pandemic hit, which made it 10 times worse because it was unclear to me whether or not I would still have a position at my corporate job. I work in the medical field, and although it was a pandemic, a medical pandemic, and we did in the medical field definitely was dependent. The medical field needed to be involved in the pandemic because of health reasons. I still was unclear whether or not my position at my corporate office in the hospital would be secure. So I decided to take more control of my finances and fix my credit. I saw the results that I had gotten for myself, and I decided that I needed to help other women like myself, because I am a single mom. And like I said, I was nervous that I might lose my position in the hospital due to some cutbacks, because we did have cutbacks, although, the medical industry was needed at that time. My position was more administrative. It wasn't hands-on. I wasn't really a first responder. I wasn't really frontline. So I got a little nervous. So I needed to take control of my finances, and being a single mom, I couldn't just think of myself. I had to think of the well-being and of my daughter. So I took control of my credit. I started reading books. I started watching YouTube videos. I started listening to podcasts. I started researching credit and what credit is and why is it so important, because I wasn't taught as a child in the household or at school how important credit was to have, especially as an adult. I always thought that cash ruled the world, but cash can take you but so far. As we all know, we need to have credit to get into certain other rooms, right? While cash can get you into the building, there's certain rooms that you need to get into, and only credit could possibly get you into that. So along the way, I was able to take myself from a 520 credit score to now what is a 752 credit score in a very short period of time. I was amazed at how quickly I could get that done. I always thought that the process would seem longer, although credit is an ongoing process and you always still do need to keep on top of it. If you stick to the rules, if you stick to the game and you learn the game, you can reach there in a short period of time. With that being said, I've been able to help quite a few other moms clean up their personal credit. I decided to start my own company, Privilege Alliance, which you mentioned. I mean, that was my drive, to help myself first. And then once I was able to see the results for myself, I decided that I needed to share my knowledge with others.
That's great. I mean, I think as we, both in the field where we're looking at empowering women around their finances, all too often, and I think, well, this is across the board for both sexes, but we just don't, it's not taught in school, we don't get an education, and it's still a taboo subject more often than not. So, we don't really learn from our parents either. So I think, as we talk about, I mean, I when I talk to a lot of women, they don't really always know to what extent it's really important to understand what a credit score is, and why it's important to know this. So you had mentioned your credit score number. So we know we all have a credit score number, and they're generally anywhere between 300 and 850. So can you shed some light for our listeners and just expand on what is a credit score?
Well, as we know, it's a 3-digit number that has a high impact on our life and the decisions that we make moving forward as adults. It's basically an adult report card, right? It grades us on how well we're able to manage our debt, how often and how quickly we can stay on top of our payments. The credit bureaus, there's 3 agencies: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, and they have a scoring board that we have no idea to this day really how they score our debt, but it's a number that highly impacts our life. So it is very important to stay above the 700s in order to live the lifestyle that you're trying to live. Anything under a 700 is pretty much just fair. It can allow you to get certain credit lines, but as an adult, there are things that come up in life, emergencies. And if you're an adult with a $500 credit line and one credit card with $500, that doesn't really equip you for life's emergencies or any unexpected things that might transpire in our lives. So a credit score of above 700 is very substantial to get and to maintain as an adult. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. The credit score goes back as far as the 1800s, even the 1700s, where individuals will go to the markets and put goods on credit because they weren't financially equipped to pay for it. So this has been around for a very long time, and it definitely isn't going anywhere. So this 3-digit number highly impacts your life, and you need to take it very seriously.
Right. It was a little more hazardous in the 1700s, right?
Yeah.
You lose a lot more than going bankrupt.
Yeah.
So we know that, for our listeners that, you know, a high score is indicating that you're good at managing your money and repaying your debt, and whereas a low credit score is going to indicate that you're a bit of a risky borrower there.
Right.
So, and I know, just to add to that, that it does get a little confusing because some scores do vary, right, depending on what kind of credit you're seeking. So it's just to heighten everyone's awareness to that. Lenders often use industry specific scores that can be adjusted to assess your risk. But the key is what you're saying, Sasha, is, you know, you got to focus on getting your score up there, because obviously it's going to impact you. It's a big deal if you're in the market for a car or a house or any type of loan, that this score is going to play an integral role in your approval process. So that's why we're talking about this today, because it's really important to know what that number means and why it matters. So can you shed a little more light, Sasha, on when we talk about a good credit score, what type of information are we seeing? So we have a credit report, and there's certain information that comes up on that. So what type of information is going to be showing up on our credit report?
So what shows up on your credit report is your payment histories, the age of your credit that you have, the different types of credit that you have, whether it's revolving or installment, when and how many times you've tried to apply for credit. That's pretty much what factors into the score. Out of 100, your payment, on-time payment history is 35% out of that 100. So that's a large chunk. So you need to pay attention, strong attention, to paying back your debt. One missed payment can throw your credit score off, especially if you don't have a mixture or multiple credit lines. So if you're an individual with just one credit card, let's say, and it's just for $500 because your score doesn't allow you to get approved for anything more than that, you miss one payment out of 12 months. And you've already taken a good 10% out of that 35% on-time payment history, and missing one payment can knock your score down a good 20 points. And I always stress to my clients, every point counts when it comes to your credit score. You know, an inquiry can take you out 3 to 5 points. And the more that you inquire about receiving credit makes you look very cash strapped, very desperate to lenders. They're not going to want to extend any kind of credit limit to you, because they know that you're at high risk. You're going to max out that card, and potentially you're not going to make those payments. So it's very important to make your payments on time, because it's a big chunk of that, and how you're using that card also is another 30%. So if your credit limit is $500 and you're at $450, you've obviously close to maxing it out. And that also affects your score. You can lose another 20, 30, 40 points just by overusing your credit card. So there are 5 major factors, and the top 2 is the payment history, which is our on-time payments, and how you're utilizing the credit that you've already been approved for.
Right.
So those 2 play a big role on that 3-digit number.
Right. So if our listeners wanted to know, you know, how do they go about finding out, how do they know if their credit score is good or not? I mean, I know, and we talked briefly about this last time we chatted, because we know with COVID, a lot of people have been relocating, and we know the housing market, you know, it's definitely a seller's market. But there's a lot of people, because of COVID, have decided to relocate and have looked to purchase a house. And again, your credit score plays a huge role in this. So if you're thinking about, your future finances and you're thinking about, I'd like to purchase a house, how can they go about and find out about their credit score?
Well, if you're living in this day and age, you should have a smartphone. So you should download one of those credit apps, such as like Credit Karma, Credit Sesame. I like the My FICO because a lot of lenders use the FICO score as opposed to the Vantage score. So there's two different scoring systems. A lot of people didn't know that. They're thinking that if they're looking at Credit Karma and Credit Karma is incorrect. It's not really incorrect. They're just on a different scoring system, which is the Vantage system. So my recommendation, if you don't know your score, download one of those apps. It's recommended that you should pull your full credit report at least once a year. I recommend at least every 6 months, because you want to stay on top of that, because the credit bureaus, sometimes they report inaccurate information. So as a consumer, you need to be on top of what is being reported, because out of every 5 individuals, at least 3 of those individuals, there's inaccurate information reporting on their credit report. So you want to take advantage of any of those free apps. My FICO isn't necessarily free, but my advice is to invest in it because it gives you the more accurate score per se, because more lenders do use the FICO. It breaks down all the different FICO scores. There's more than just 3 credit scores. There's like 28 different credit scores with regards to your mortgage, car loans, credit card loans. So you want to educate yourself on your personal report, so you know it in and out. They can report something as simple as your name incorrectly, and that gives you a reason to dispute that, or any information reporting on there, because your name has to be correct. Any information that's reporting has to be correct, because if it's not, then it's not you and it's not your debt. So take the time out to download one of those free apps, pencil through the information, make sure everything that's reporting is reporting accurately and that it's reporting to you.
Right. And I know during COVID, I haven't kept up to date with this particular aspect, but they were saying, because I think it's you could access it for free every year, but
Yes.
during COVID they were allowing people to access it at any time for any number of times without any cost. Now I don't know if that's still valid, but I think, as you say, you have to be, it's not just knowing your number, but also checking to make sure
you have to check the profile. The number can say anything, but if the profile doesn't match, it's not even worth it, because there's individuals that have kept 700 plus credit score and can still be denied for credit lines, and they're wondering why. But they go into the body, the report, the profile, to find out what's reporting on you. So if there's information in there that's incorrect, that's stopping you from being approved, you want to make sure you stay on top of that.
Yeah. No, that's really important.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to touch base on, we were talking about, the different things that are on your credit report. And it just popped into my head, because this has come up a couple of times when I've met with clients, thinking that they're saving money. So for example, if they go to purchase an item at a large chain store, and they'll be offered, would you, we'll give you 10% off if you want to take it out on our card. There's TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Walmart, all of them. And what often I find clients don't realize is that, that can affect your number once you start taking those out. You got to balance it out in terms of, you're thinking, I'm going to save some money here, but as you open up these new lines of credit, then
they impact, because you're running your information. So now you have another inquiry, and you have a credit card that you can only use at that particular location. So in my personal opinion, I stay away from those specific store cards. like a Gap card or Forever 21. I'm not sure. I believe Forever 21. Those little stores, those little department stores, because you can only use that card in that store. To me, it's not worth it. I'd rather get a card that's universal that I can use anywhere. And the reason why I say that is because how often do you shop at that store? And even if you are a frequent flyer of that store, I mean, you can only get but so much. You can only utilize that card but so much. Whereas if you go into a larger department store like Macy's or Bloomingdale's, where they offer you the store card, but it's an American Express card, and now you can use this card anywhere. You can go get groceries. You can put gas in your car. It just to me, it makes better sense. I think the risk of losing the 3 to 5 points is more worth it, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't suggest doing it. Unless it's maybe like a BJ's, where you have to get food consistently. But I personally, I don't recommend it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to that is that I'm always sharing is that it's a double-edged sword in terms of you've got to create a credit history in order to be eligible for loans, and there's good loans like your education's a good loan because you're investing in yourself. A house typically they're an asset, so there's the good loans and then there's the not so good loans. But I mean, credit cards can be good as long as you don't have a million of them.
It depends on how you use the debt, how
you use them. It's all tied to that. So it's like at the end of the day, I always say compound interest is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when you're putting your money to work for you, but it works the other way when we're looking at the credit cards. So we know that, a good score range is probably 690 to 720, something like that. And
I'd say like 680. 680, about there, I would say, yeah.
Okay, so anything below that may indicate, potential for future problems with repayment. So we've just shared with everybody, if you're not sure what your current score is, then you need to go find out what it is. So if somebody is below that number, so how can they start to improve their credit score?
There are a number of things. There's one particular thing that I advise my clients on doing, and that's trade lines, adding positive trade lines to their credit to help boost their score and to give them history if they're lacking history and if they're lacking age. A positive trade line can be adding your on-time rental payments reporting to the credit bureaus. Another thing is if you have a close friend or family member and they have impeccable credit, they have on-time payments, great credit history, great age, you can be added to one of their cards as an authorized user. This can help add, some points, some history and some age. You'll just be borrowing their information as an authorized user. You wouldn't actually need to use their credit. You're just borrowing it for a short period of time until you can establish your own credit and become a primary on one of your own cards. So those are two little tricks to building some credit.
So I know, and again, during COVID, because people were furloughed or laid off, and then they were dealing with, okay, so how do I, didn't have an emergency fund and worrying about how they were going to meet their basic needs, such as food and rent, etc. So my response was always, you got to have, once you figure out, what your expenses are and your income is, if you have income from another source, but figuring out, so you have to have some type of plan, because it's like I would say, if you're going to go on a road trip to a place you've never been before, then you're either going to take a map or a GPS. You're not going to just get in your car and go, because the likelihood is you may not get there. it may take you way longer than you've planned for to get there. So we know everybody needs a plan, but figuring out exactly how much you owe, I think is key. And I know this is terrifying sometimes for clients, but you've got to do it. You've got to look at all those credit lines and calculate exactly how much you owe. So once you understand that, you're kind of in a better position then to start looking at, I think a couple of people I had shared with during COVID was they were worried about some of their debt. And it's like, talk to your creditors. If you can't pay on time, everybody understands right now. And outside of COVID, I think it's still, because
communication,
yeah. And these companies, they want that, they'd rather you figure out a payment plan that's affordable than you not paying at all. And it works in everybody's best interest then. But that's part of, once you've talked to them, kind of making that plan on how you're going to tackle this and get that debt down. But the other thing, and I'm a big proponent of this, period, especially when it comes to just saving money and putting money away, is automating your payments.
Definitely. That is a big number one. Definitely. That is number one on the list. That's definitely what I vocalize to most of my clients. You have to set it up. We can't stay on top of everything. We're moving pieces in the world. We're always being dragged and pulled in this direction. You have to remember this and you have to remember that. So setting your payments on auto pay is the number one best thing you could do for your finances, and to stay on top of having a great payment history, which again is a 35% of that $100 of that 100% score. So that's definitely rule number one that I try to tell all my clients: auto pay, auto pay, auto pay.
Right.
Yes.
And that works for the savings account as well.
That also, yes, definitely.
Pay yourself first so you can build up that emergency fund.
Exactly.
So you can avoid going into debt when things such as COVID arise. So
definitely.
So we've talked about the scores. You talked a little bit about the errors and what people should be looking for. I think one of the other things is, keeping your balances as low as possible is a key factor here. Is there anything else, any other tips that the listeners should be aware of?
I mean, if the number one rule that I've heard a lot of successful people say is, if you can't buy the item 5 times over, then you don't need it. So stop trying to spend money that you really don't have. And that's where a lot of us go awry. Myself, I'm very guilty of that. I can personally say that. I go for the want instead of the need. So try to factor out whether or not you necessarily need to spend that money on that item. Sit down and think about how that want is going to benefit you now and in the long run, because a want can go away, but a need will be there for forever if you don't tackle it. So you have to stay on top of certain things. You have to think about things before you spend, because there's like over 43 million Americans with less than a 599 credit score. And that's probably tripled since the pandemic of last year. Right. So you really have to sit down and think about, do you really need what you're about to spend that money on, what you're really about to just max that credit card out on? Like, sit down and weigh your pros and your cons, because a lot of the times why we end up with bad credit scores is because of how we manage our finances. And one late payment can turn into 3 late payments, which then turns into a collection and a charge off. And then you went from a 7-something credit score to a 500-something credit score, and you don't know what went wrong. And it was just that one decision, that one bad decision that you decided to make, because you didn't know the consequences that it would hold behind it, because you've now went out and spent money on this lavish item, and COVID happened and you lost your job, and now this item has put you into debt because you didn't prepare well. So you want to think about every purchase before you make that purchase.
Right. Yes. And now we're getting back to some normality.
Yes.
You know, focusing on your emergency fund is also key. So I, you know, it's at the end of our time. I'm really interested in talking about this and could probably spend another hour or so chatting to you.
Yeah, this can go on for hours, definitely.
I know. But I mean, really, thank you for sharing what a credit score means and why we should care. I think our listeners should know now that, you know, this number reflects your history of borrowing money. It can be worth thousands of dollars when you apply for loans or mortgages, as well as determining whether or not you're approved for certain things, whether it be an apartment rental, you know, a mortgage, even jobs.
And your interest
jobs
rates.
Yeah,
they're checking your credit score now with jobs. Yeah, they want to see how responsible you are.
Right.
And it goes, your credit score shows your it reflects, it's a reflection of you and how well you handle responsibilities, you know, so on, and your character per se. So you really want to stay on top of these things. And the interest rates, you want to think about that too. You think you're saving by not taking care of this debt, but it costs you more. Not repairing your credit costs more than repairing your credit.
Yeah. So
definitely does.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody's taken away from today's discussion, knowing where your credit card stands before applying, you know, to anything important could save you time, frustration, and stress in the long run. So thank you again, Sasha. It's been a pleasure. So where can our listeners find you?
So my website is privilegedalliancefinance.com. I'm on Instagram at _I am Sasha Ellis, which is IAMSACHAELLIS.
Okay, and I will share that in the show notes, so our listeners can find you as well. So I would just like to say to everybody, thank you for taking time to listen in to us. And the Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club. And our goal is to get 1 million women to start the money conversation with spouse, friends, or colleagues, because knowledge is power. And when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. So thank you again to our listeners. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, and in appreciation for being a listener of the show, we are gifting our financial self-care guide to keep you feeling positive and encouraged. And after all, the gift of financial self-care is the gift that lasts a lifetime. So don't forget to subscribe, because we love hearing from our listeners and sharing questions that you may have. So please feel free to do that in the comments. And until our next episode, here's to your financial well-being. Bye.